Hello and welcome to the Walnut Creek Crawdads pregame show. I am Kobe Siegel and I'm back with Justin DeHaas, and we are here at McBean Stadium for to face the Lincoln Potters and the Walnut Creek Crawdads. We're 20-6. They can clinch the playoffs with a win today. We thought they would do it last night, but the Sonoma Stompers won in walk-off fashion, 8-7. But if they win, they can clinch the playoffs. Justin, how cool is it to be potentially covering a playoff team?
It's really cool considering that last year, obviously, we weren't with the team, but Austin was, and he was talking to us about that. And I believe they finished third in the North last year. They made the playoffs, but lost their first two games and were out. And it seems like they have a lot of returners and a lot of good new additions to the squad that you already know by this point that has really made the squad a lot better. And this year they have a real chance of winning it all, I believe.
Yes, and they're only 2 games back of Healdsburg. Obviously, the big series is going to be versus Healdsburg, but for now, we got the Lincoln Potters and Justin. We we haven't seen the Lincoln Potters in a few days. What exactly have the Lincoln Potters been up to?
Well, they played the aforementioned Healdsburg Improvement Packers and proceeded to beat them in the series 2 out of 3 games. Keep in mind, both of those games that they won were at Healdsburg, and I was listening to the call yesterday, and it appeared that Healdsburg hadn't lost a home game in like 24 games. I think they had a 24 home game winning streak, and that was broken twice. I mean, that was, they lost to the Potters a few days ago and then did it again yesterday. And yeah, so very impressive to say the least, especially considering that what we've seen from the Crawdads, they've gone to Healdsburg twice, and they haven't won at Healdsburg yet, and that's something they're going to need to do next week. But again, that's next week. Let's talk about the Potters, and obviously taking it serious from Healdsburg is very impressive. That's what the Crawdads have done, so we understand that both these squads are really good.
Yes, and part of the reason uh, uh, they won last game is pitching performance from Craig Schmidt. He is not pitching today. The starting pitcher for the Lincoln Potters is Cooper Robinson, who we saw last time, and we were saying on the broadcast before the game that we thought he was gonna go like 4 or 5 innings, and he only went 2. Now he was great in those 2 innings. Yeah, I believe he went 2 scoreless innings, no walks. Again, he still has not walked anyone this season, but he only went 2 innings. So, um, do we know why, Justin?
We don't know why, but after the last time, I didn't know if it was because maybe it was something planned or maybe it was an injury, but at this point, I speculate that it might have been planned, considering that he's already back. I mean, if he was injured, I don't know if he'd start today. I mean, today is what would be his regular start if he was healthy. So, I don't know the case. Haven't talked to the Lincoln people about that, but I think it might have been planned, which seems odd to me, considering that, like we said before, in 2 of his first 3 outings this summer, he went 5 innings or more, and he hasn't allowed an earned run. And he was really good in his 2 innings of work too. Only allowed 1 hit, and so clearly, this kid's got some good stats. But for some reason, that seemed like it was the strategy, and didn't really work out for them. So I don't know if they're gonna change that coming into this game.
Yeah, and like the Crawdads have done in many games this season, uh, the starter may have foiled them for the first few innings, but then once they get to the bullpen, uh, they thrived and came back from a 5-0 deficit and a 6-2 deficit uh, to win 9-6. And yeah, Cooper Robinson, um, at as a sophomore at UC Irvine, his first 2 appearances he went 4 innings, and then the rest. I mean, he was averaging about an inning or two uh, per appearance. So yeah, I mean, I wonder if there's an innings limit. Um, I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of.
Especially because the game he pitched on was Saturday, and so it's less than a week than since he was last pitched. Where we'll get to talking about this in a little bit, but Dylan McShane, his last appearance was against the Potters last Friday, and so that's a week from ago. And I mean, that's his regular starting time too, right? So the fact that this is certainly Robinson's regular starting time. If anything, it's a little sooner than you expect. So maybe it is because he only threw 2 innings and he's a little more rested that he could go today. But yeah, I'm curious to see what Jonathan Peters does about that.
Yes, and you mentioned Dylan McShane. So Dylan McShane on this season, uh, uh, for the Crawdads, his line is, you know, it has not been a total success. He's a 5.68 ERA in league play. He's pitched in 4 games, 12 and 2/3 innings, 7 strikeouts, 10 walks. And I asked Brant what he wanted to see from Dylan McShane, and he replied with 2 words: throw strikes.
I was telling you before, that is very much a Brant response. He is very short and concise with his wording, and yet it gets the message across perfectly clear, and that is the exact right answer that Brant needed to say. And yeah, throw strikes. I mean, look at, he had 4 walks against the Potters last time. I think that's what Brant is alluding to, and it was a little disappointing to see that he struggled against the Potters, because even though we know that the Potters are a good squad, before that he went 4 innings, 2 earned against the Packers, who, I mean, I think we would assume is a better squad. Granted, the Potters just took 2 of 3 from the Packers, so maybe that's not the case. But I mean, against the two of the better teams in the CCL North, he had one pretty good performance, and then the other was a little bit of a setback. So I'm hoping to see if Dylan McShane can bounce back from that. And, he's already seen these guys, a little bit. So maybe he has a little more intel and info on them and see if he could do some damage. But again, those guys have some more info and intel on McShane. So I'm curious to see who wins that chess match.
Yeah, and Brett Cummings clearly has trusted Dylan McShane against these top teams. You mentioned he started against Healdsburg. He started against Lincoln. In their loss. So so clearly Brandt trusts him. But yeah, throwing strikes has been an issue in all of his appearances. He's had at least as many walks as strikeouts. So I mean, that shows you that he's had some trouble throwing strikes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I mean, he also simultaneously last start he did have 4 strikeouts, which is the most he's had in a game. Prior to that, he only was averaging 1 strikeout per game. So that is encouraging to see. So he did get some swing and miss in there, but he also just was a little bit wild in terms of his command. So if he can really clean that up, I like his chances today.
Yes, for sure. And that development is very positive to see. Dylan McShane, going to be a sophomore at Oregon, so it is for him. It is all about development, and one step forward in the development is his command and throwing strikes. We've seen him kind of get behind batters early. It's been a lot of 2-0 counts, a lot of 3-0 counts. It's just really hard, and that's why batters have a 403 on base percentage against Dylan McShane, but only a 268 slugging percentage. So they've gone on base via the walk mostly, but when they're hitting him, they aren't hitting him well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I mean, look, I think it's funny because when we look at the Solano Mudcats last time, they weren't really slugging too much. And I mean, we expect this Lincoln squad to have more slug. We know that they have a potent lineup to say the least. So I expect a little bit more, but that is a little ironic considering that you say that.
Yeah, and well, uh, they did have the CCL North batter of the week in Zachary Chamizo,
Chamizo.
who has, I mean, he has been fantastic, but
Doesn't look like he's in the lineup today.
yeah, no. So that is kind of a big loss. But we've seen Patrick Herrera, who was previously batting all the 9 spot. Now he's batting 4th. He has had a home run in 3 out of his last 4 games. That's what we're seeing here. And
I mean, when you look at that top of the lineup right there, 283, 321, 323 average, and except for Ruben Church, the other two guys, Luke Auden and Nolan Wilson, have played 17 games. So those are some pretty impressive stats. And I mean, Dom Rodriguez, he only has a 225 average, but I know he had a good game against the Crawdads last time around too. Luke Lavin, committed to Stanford, so clearly he's a good ball player, but yeah, I mean, they've got some good players in this lineup, so you can't really take them for granted.
yes, and they have good players despite losing a lot of players. I know uh, Austin knows all about that. How important it is to keep your players, and the Crawdads, for the most part, have kept a lot of their good players. Unfortunately, we will be losing Ryan Brome in a few days, but this lineup just has so much depth. And speaking about this lineup, um, who do you have your eye on today, Justin?
Well, you mentioned how Ryan Brome will be leaving in a few days. He's also not in the lineup today. He is visiting southeastern Louisiana for one of his visits, as he is in the portal. But beside that, you've got Ellis, Duroff, Donnelly, King, Fellows, Pointer, Farfan, Helfrich, and Harrison. And I'm looking at guys like Farfan and Helfrich, who are at the bottom of this lineup. Farfan, as I'm sure you got some stats for, has been one of the best hitters so far. And
Sorry, we have a moment of silence. We'll be back.
alrighty, and we are back. And so,
Yes.
what were we talking about?
Um. Oh, you're talking about
The lineup.
Max Farfan and
Yeah, so
and the better health there?
Farfan's been one of the better hitters for the Crawdads lately, and Ryder Helfrich obviously is one of the more talented kids on the squad, and he's hitting eighth. So clearly, I mean, when you've got those two guys at the bottom third of the lineup, it's gonna be a tough lineup for Cooper Robinson to manage.
Yeah, and some numbers on Max Farfan. So at one point in the season, he was hitting an abysmal 091. But since then, in in his last since July 9th, his last 2 weeks, he's hitting 478, the 611 on base percentage, and a 1.2 slugging percentage. So he's been the Crawdads' hottest hitter for the last 2 weeks after being maybe the Crawdads' worst hitter for the first part of the season. So, I mean, he's been awesome.
And he's hitting seventh, and he leads in home runs.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's just how we keep on talking about the Crawdads lineup as a strength and how deep it is, and Exhibit A is right there.
Yeah, and one guy I'm keeping my eye on is Griffin Harrison in center field. Had a real tough game in center field. The usually reliable Griffin Harrison hit a few balls that just seemed like they went through his glove. I'm not sure if it was the sun. I don't really know what happened, but I hope he can bounce back here today, as it'll be really important, because maybe you can get away with those mistakes against the Solano Mudcats, but against the Lincoln Potters, gotta bring your best, especially after they beat Healdsburg in a full series. That's crazy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we'll start wrapping up things here, but it's the first game of the three-game series between the second and third place teams in the North. And look, like we said, Crawdads, their magic number's 1. So if they can win this game today, they could clinch themselves a playoff spot. If not, then maybe Sonoma loses, and they can kind of back their way in. But obviously, they want to get in with a win, and they can do that today. They have the control of that.
Yes, control their own destiny, and I don't know. Maybe we'll have a champagne party. Probably not. They're not old enough. But thank you for listening to the pregame show. We will get Carson Austin broadcast very soon for this game. And see you guys on the main broadcast.